If I had to pick one spell to be in my wand, I would pick Expecto Patronum. I read somewhere that J.K. Rowling created the Dementors based on her own experience with depression. Because of my experience with anxiety, that speaks to me deeply. I love the scene in Book 3 where Professor Lupin is teaching Harry the spell because he says Harry's greatest fear is fear itself. I know that's a Roosevelt quote and a bit of a cliche, but it rings so true to me. I have in the past had panic attacks that were triggered by the possibility that I would have a panic attack. So I love the idea of being able to conjure up a guardian, a piece of my strongest self to protect me from my fears.
This is Potter Watch, a podcast where creative energy flows through the arts and literature. Join our special guest, Tamar Shapiro-Tanir, as she connects Harry Potter with folk literature, the theater, and her own personal story. In Voldemort's Corner, we'll take a look at what happens when personal stories out of touch with the real world influence the everyday workings of government. I'll review Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final text, Where Do We Go From Here? And inspired by my visit with Tamar, I wrote my own wizard rock tune called Cursed Boomerang. So keep your eyes on that house cup as we go inside the Pensieve. Okay, Tamar, you ready to go inside the Pensieve?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
All right, well, welcome to episode 14 of Potter Watch.
Thank you. This is exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you here. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I am a graduate of LACS up on West Hill.
Yeah.
I love literature and I hope to be a writer eventually. I am very inspired by how well the Harry Potter books are written. I would love to be able to write as well as that.
You spoke earlier a bit about your passion for reading and writing.
Yeah.
Which sounds like it runs deep. And
Very.
Yeah.
My sister was in a play last weekend.
Okay.
About this universal language,
Okay.
and I annoyed her a bit by reading it over and over because I love words so much. I just wanted to take the whole thing apart and look at it.
Just to look at the words.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I find, I like to do that with written music. When I'm reading music that I'm playing, sometimes I'll just sit and look at the notes.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating and kind of meditative too.
It's awkward because I'm a singer, but I can't really read sheet music.
Yeah.
So I can't relate to that exact experience, but it's all kind of the same. I am glad that people still do look at things written on paper in this technological age.
Yeah.
And even the play, I was reading it on my iPhone, so I can't say I'm exempt, but I do still love a big pile of books.
I heard that you, when you go to the library, you tend to come out with a large pile of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sometimes too heavy for me to carry a long way, so I have to leave it at my mom's office and then come back for it later. Some books I read in a day, and some books it takes me months or even years to finish.
Yeah. You have any examples?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm reading Lolita, and that's another thing my sister gets annoyed about. She's gonna kill me for saying this. So I tell people I'm reading Lolita, and she says, "You say you're reading Lolita, but you have had it out from the library for ages."
Yeah.
And and that's true. It's a very thick, well, not so much in its length, but in its content. It's a very dense book, so there's only so much one can read at a time.
Sure.
On the other hand, I'm rereading the Warriors series, which I was very passionate about in middle school, and usually I'll pick up one of those books, sit down with it at lunch, and then after lunch I'll move to the living room and keep reading till it's done.
Yeah.
I always expect the librarians to give me funny looks because the level of material I read is so varying.
Yeah. Yeah. Some reading you need to read about what you're reading to understand it. Yeah.
I've been in, is it 4 Shakespeare plays in high school?
Awesome.
And one of the things that we do in Shakespeare in the basement, or they do now, I'm an alum, which is still weird for me.
Is that a theater group?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the things is, at the first rehearsal we do a read-through, and at the second rehearsal we do a modern through, which is reading it, but not actually reading it, saying it as if it's a modern play to make sure we understand what we're saying.
Sure. Does that mean you change the words?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in Taming of the Shrew last year, the read-through line is, Horatio, thou knowest not gold's effect, and I believe in the modern through it was, you don't get how awesome money is, man. One way to do this without doing the thinking yourself, which is to get a no fear Shakespeare, which has on the left side the original text and on the right side a more easy version.
Wow. I don't think they had that when I was reading Shakespeare in high school.
Probably not.
Yeah. That's great. It sounds like there's a relationship between reading and theater that is coming clearer to me listening to you that I hadn't noticed as much before. You know, we see the productions. If we go as just a audience participant, we don't always see the amount of reading that goes into theater. It seems.
But before the production, there's got to be a script.
Yeah, right.
I learned a lot about this last spring. I wrote and then produced a play called The Young Queers Strike Back. I don't know if you heard about it.
No, tell me about it.
Well, at LACS we need to do senior projects.
Okay.
I'd had this one in mind for 4 years then, nearly 5 now, when someone at my school wrote and then put on a play called Ruminations about the experiences of students with disabilities. And I was just coming out of the closet then, and I thought how great it would be to have one about young queers, so I wrote it.
Awesome.
I took the plot a little bit from the story Am I Blue by Bruce Coville, who is another great writer for young people but also for older people.
Okay.
In that story, a young boy is beaten up and then is rescued by a fairy godfather, fairy both in the traditional sense and in the slang sense.
Okay, yeah.
So I based the relationship between my 2 main characters, Will and Neil, off that a lot, and then I added in more characters of various genders and sexualities.
A good example of how we, if you're an avid reader, you cover a lot of, you're well read, as we say, right?
Yes.
I know just as in music, if you're well listened, great writers of all sorts are always borrowing and copying and
very true.
Yeah, looking at what's come before and then adding your twist onto that.
Like we were talking about earlier with the elves and the shoemaker.
Yeah, right.
So
Which I had not made the connection. So let's tell our listeners.
I don't know how well listeners know the story of the elves and the shoemaker. I hope they do because it's a great story. It's about this poor shoemaker who's down on his luck until two elves who are dressed in rags come and make beautiful shoes, and then he gets back on his feet, and to thank them he makes them clothes, and after that they run away and disappear. So I don't know if I got it the first time I read Chamber of Secrets, but at some point it clicked in my brain. Dobby's plotline is totally based on the elves and the shoemaker.
Yeah. Young Queers Strike Back.
Yes. Yeah. I also got the title from Star Wars.
I just had that association to The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so it's hard to not have that happen.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
Well...
Or hard to say, because you're a fan.
I have to admit, not that well versed in Star Wars. Yeah. I tried to watch the movie and I couldn't get through. Yeah. I've learned a little more by reading Shakespeare's Star Wars, which that takes us back to Shakespeare. It's Star Wars written in iambic pentameter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's really great.
Wow. Where is this?
Well, I found it at the library.
No kidding. Wow. I'd like to get a copy of that.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was a great title. My mom thought it was a little violent, and I said, well, I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with my young queers learning to stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
Which is, in the end, what they do.
Now, as with all writers, it's often readers are wondering how much of it, especially with fiction, of course, how much of this is autobiographical and how much of it isn't. And I'm curious, that's my first question. Then I have a follow-up.
Well, a lot of it is, not just for me. I had various friends of mine write monologues for the main characters to say.
Okay.
Some of them also played those characters later. I wrote the role of Leah, a flamboyant, genderqueer person.
Okay.
Specifically for my friend who played them.
Okay.
I also wrote the role of Neil for a friend who did not end up playing him, but who wrote his monologue.
I see.
And
so you're writing for actors.
A little bit.
Right? You're not saying that it's based on...
Well, it is based on them, but I also, once I had their monologues, wrote to play to who these people are.
Yeah.
I also wrote 2 roles based on myself that was not intentional.
Okay.
I wrote the one that I played, Marta, which is an anagram of my name, based off myself currently.
Yeah. And
then each older queer had a corresponding young queer, as I think I mentioned already.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't intentional, but Marta's young queer, Emma, ended up taking on a lot of me. I had egotistically or insecurely or something before the rehearsal process started thought, of course I'm going to play myself, who else can do it? But then the girl playing Emma, she would read this monologue that I'd written based off my own experience.
Yeah.
And every time she did it, tears would come to my eyes. She was incredible.
Yeah.
And it was such an amazing experience
Yeah.
seeing people that I'd created come into being.
Yeah. I think there's a benefit as a writer from writing more realistically or more fantastically. In other words, if we put that on a continuum, to attempt, which I imagine would be difficult, to attempt to write completely from one's imagination.
My
on
mom
one
has been
end.
telling me to write more from my head for years. It's difficult because I'm a big believer in write what you know, but
Write what you know. Okay.
it's got to be a balance. Like in another great book series, the Mother-Daughter Book Club.
Yes, I know that one.
Yes.
Yep.
One of the characters gets in big trouble when he writes a character who is very explicitly based off a real person.
I see.
I always have to be thinking when I'm writing people inspired by real people,
Yeah.
how much of this needs to be fictionalized in order to protect that person's
Sure.
identity.
Hmm. Is there something in it for the author to write more or less
For the author.
realistically versus imaginally?
Well, I think that the more you write what you know again, the more realistic it can be. I'm not a big fan of writers who just say whatever they want without bearing on whether it could happen in the real world.
Okay.
Or in a world of their own imagination. Either one. Like, I can accept all kinds of fantastical elements, but the characters have to be human inside.
Why is that?
Because, well, I'll speak for myself. I read to relate to other humans, and it's hard to do that when a character doesn't feel like someone I could relate to.
And do you think your play works in the same way? That it's something that
Yes,
that others will be able to relate to?
feel quite good about my play's relatability.
Yeah.
Now, if I could just be sure of writing a novel that's equally relatable.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think that Voldemort, if he were to write a novel, what would he write about?
I don't know. I don't really see Voldemort as the novel writing type, to be honest.
So would you like to go to Voldemort's corner to find out?
Sure.
Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man.
Like the obscurest and fantastic beasts and where to find them, our own fears, hurts, and sadness can be all-consuming and lend themselves to taking us to out-of-control and helpless places. If ever there were a psychologist capable of articulating how the personal and political can be consumed by such states in tandem, it's Martin Luther King Jr. That's right, MLK leaves no doubt in my mind that among his other great talents and passions, he had an adept handle on the human psyche and its tendency to merge with the social environment. In what would become his last book, Where Do We Go From Here?, published by Beacon Press in 1968. King takes a hopeful stance toward creating a social environment born of the best our minds can offer, despite our troubles. In what I can only describe as a powerfully loving voice, he lays bare how an entire community of oppressed people can come together with allies to take a responsible and caring approach to ending hate-filled policies and personal habits. In his own words, power, properly understood, is the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, or economic changes. In this sense, power is not only desirable, but necessary in order to implement the demands of love and justice. One of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites. The Good Doctor explores how to move from chaos to community, not by ignoring the pain of oppression or allowing it to consume us, but through transforming conditions of powerlessness into creative and positive power. While he writes of racial injustice in the United States, we can apply his vision not only to other injustices, but also to our own personal struggles. Our own emotions can be oppressive, as well as the groups that we interact with on a daily basis. Again, in King's words, "But revolution born of despair cannot long be sustained by despair. This is the ultimate contradiction of the Black Power movement. It claims to be the most revolutionary wing of the social revolution taking place in the United States. Yet it rejects the one thing that keeps the fire of revolution burning, the ever-present flame of hope. In place of hope, when dealing with past hurts, we become vulnerable to masking gratuitous gestures as efforts to promote change. These futile attempts at progress can include violence and destruction. If you need to feel how power and love can be integrated, listen to one of King's speeches. His voice succeeded in making nonviolence a viable alternative to chaos and brought us all closer to the truth. Here he is once again. It is time for all of us to tell each other the truth about who and what have brought the Negro to the condition of deprivation against which he struggles today. In human relations, the truth is hard to come by, because most groups are deceived about themselves. Rationalization and the incessant search for scapegoats are the psychological cataracts that blind us to our individual and collective sins. But the day has passed for bland euphemisms. He who lives with untruth lives in spiritual slavery. Freedom is the bonus we receive for knowing the truth. I can picture Dr. King marching with his friends, wand in hand, ready to sit and listen, and just as ready to bring forth Expelliarmus or Expecto Patronum to help us keep our wits about us. Can you?
Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man.
I think Voldemort would write something more like Mein Kampf.
Of course.
Yeah, that's something I've thought about a lot. I'd like to think I would have drawn the strings just by reading Harry Potter, but I think it helped that I also read Warriors, and their villain, Tiger Star, is a lot like Voldemort, and I think they're both based on Hitler quite a bit.
It's not a novel.
No, it is not a novel.
It's certainly not a fantasy fiction.
That's another of those books that I've been trying to read forever, and I can't get very far at a time. I hope my grandparents don't fall over in shock when they hear that. I think that someone that evil, it's very it would be very interesting to get inside their mind to see what fueled all that hate. Something that I think would be interesting would be a book written by a storybook villain, not like Wicked, although I love Wicked. Not one where the villain is completely misunderstood, one where they are still evil, but one that looks at what it's like to be them still. Like a book that doesn't excuse Voldemort's actions, but does look at what it's like to be Voldemort.
I see, yeah. Yeah, well, that's the spirit of Voldemort's Corner.
Yes, indeed. It also reminds me of Harry in his dark side.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Mein Kampf is my struggle.
Yeah.
He's, it's autobiographical.
Yeah. And from what I saw in the introduction, I haven't gotten far enough to see it for myself.
Yeah.
It'll occasionally go off on political tangents. I wonder if that's something Voldemort would do too. The whole Ministry Dumbledore power struggle.
Second book I reviewed was called The Anatomy of Human Destruction by Erich Fromm, who was the father of psychohistory, which was logical theories and ideas to the larger social systems we live in, and interpreting what was going on in their contemporary times through a psychological lens. But they would kind of psychoanalyze, politics. So yeah, it's a very familiar.
That's great. I think politics should be psychoanalyzed.
Yeah. So the Anatomy of Human Destructiveness is Erich Fromm's psychological autopsy on Adolf Hitler, taking a deep look at his personal history and his struggle to become an independent individual who, could lead a meaningful life. And it was interesting that he really struggled with that.
Yeah.
And,
that also sounds a lot like Voldemort.
Yeah.
Half-Blood Prince is such a great book in that we get to learn so much about his backstory.
I like this theme of how the personal and political go together.
Yeah.
And, once things take hold and we can really tell, right? It's really palatable that the ministry is not the same ministry.
I don't know, going back to Hitler, if Voldemort went quite as far in his interrogations of non-pure bloods as Hitler went in his of pretty much everyone.
Yeah, sure.
I suppose he didn't need concentration camps. He could just Avada Kedavra everyone.
Yeah, good point. Right.
But yeah, that's a big connection. The wish to create a pure race that's on top and to annihilate everyone else. Another relation is at Bill and Fleur's wedding. How I think it's Kingsley Shacklebolt who comes to warn them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the Anschluss. The dictator has taken over. He started his reign of terror.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've thought about this connection quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the earlier we were talking about the continuum of realism versus imaginal plot lines, and I wonder if there's something about what we would imagine, a Voldemort piece of literature would look like. Maybe something like Mein Kampf. I wonder if and I have not read through Mein Kampf myself completely. I've taken a look at it and heard people write about it. I wonder how much of it is fantastical, and I
Right.
wonder if there's some connection between someone coming to power whose instruction book for how to run things is fantasy based. Is too imaginal, isn't real
could.
enough. Isn't something others can relate to.
Yeah, I could get very political here, but I think I'd better
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
However, one thing I'll say that is a concern currently, I know,
Yeah.
is that once Voldemort comes to power,
Yeah.
people who have been suppressing their pure blood leanings, like Dolores Umbridge,
Yeah.
they don't have to hide that anymore. They can be as, well, racist as they want.
Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man. Oh yeah, frustrations of a young man.
What do you think that says about Umbridge? What's going on there?
Well, Umbridge is, I think, my least favorite character in the whole series. I have never liked people who play hero or victim or whatever as an excuse to get what they want. And I don't know if she plays victim so much, but she certainly plays martyr.
Uh-huh. And then what does she want?
Power.
She gets it by playing a martyr. How do you see that?
Like when she first shows up, she is all sugary sweet.
Yes.
And no one trusts that sweetness because underneath it is this ugly, ugly mind. I do have, in reverse, strong feelings about the way Umbridge is punished for her cruelty at the end of Book 5. I don't know exactly what happens with her and those centaurs, but
Yeah.
my mind always goes to very ugly places.
Yeah, my stomach gets sick when I...
And
that.
when she comes back, she's very traumatized.
Yeah.
And while I wouldn't say that she's who I want as an example of a strong woman leading a government, but she is that. I'll give her that. And she gets what strong women leading governments usually do get, which is the worst punishment a woman can get, you know. I wonder, when I started this, I was discussing how when Voldemort comes to power, she doesn't have to hide her hate anymore.
Yes.
But now part of me is wondering if the reason her hate is more overt in Book 7 than Book 5 is because of what happened with those centaurs.
You're using her sweetness and her martyr-like qualities seem to go together. Tell me more about that. The
I don't know.
martyr-
This is a little bit based on personal experience.
Okay.
I don't get along with people who think too much of themselves. That's why I would never be a Gryffindor, because I don't like to hang around people who make their life about being heroes.
I see. So she's coming in to save everyone.
Yeah.
This school is a mess. Going around with her clipboard.
Yeah.
Look at this. Teaching, Professor Trelawney. And
Yeah.
Weasley twins up to their shenanigans, right?
Yeah.
I see. So she comes in, she sees a mess, and she's going to save everyone from it.
I also, from a feminist perspective,
Yeah.
don't like how she is sneaky about getting power. Like, McGonagall is a powerful woman and she doesn't hide from it. She doesn't downplay it with pink and kittens and all
Yes.
that stuff.
Awesome observation. Right. So I wondered about all the pinkness and right. That's a smoke and mirrors
Yeah.
to hide the harshness. Yeah. And McGonagall is kind of the reciprocal of that.
Yeah.
Seems harsh, and yet she really has her heart in the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think, the general role Maggie Smith plays now
Yeah.
that I think about it.
Sure.
Something people say to me a lot is that the more someone puffs themselves up, the more insecure they are. That makes sense in this context. Like, McGonagall doesn't need to prove that she's in charge, she just is.
Yeah.
Something about, to go back to Voldemort, that
Yeah.
I was thinking is about that insecurity. Voldemort is, I think, really terrified of losing control from the time he's little, maybe because he never really had it. And that's why he will do anything to not die. Because he doesn't have control over that.
Yeah.
Earlier, I think I was talking about how I love in Harry Potter that the winner isn't the strongest person necessarily, but the person with the most heart.
Yes, right.
How Lily saved Harry when he was a baby by her love for him. And years later, Harry kills Voldemort not with an attacking spell, but a defensive spell.
Yeah.
Both Voldemort and Wormtail, neither of them commit suicide on purpose, but they both kind of do it accidentally because Wormtail is strangled by his own hand.
Right.
And Voldemort's Avada Kedavra spell backfires on him twice.
Yeah.
A question that we didn't get to is, which character do you identify with? And
Right.
when I was reading the books, I really actually identified with Quirrell.
Yeah.
Because I was reading the books at the height of my anxiety,
Okay.
and I could see how someone would do anything, even ally with the Dark Lord, to not feel so powerless.
So Voldemort uses an attack spell that backfires on him.
Yeah.
Because he's out there with this fantasy idea that his struggles are coming from non-purebloods that he
Right.
needs to purify everyone from. He's following a narrative that's fantastical, really.
Yeah.
It's an illusion that his problems, that his struggles are coming from non-purebloods.
I think
Yeah.
we all write stories in our heads to narrate our lives. Sometimes we need a hero, so we create one. Sometimes we need a villain, so we create one.
Yeah.
I do, there's got to be a balance here. I think it's very important that everyone feels like the hero of their own story.
Yeah.
But I also think it's important that they not try to be the hero of someone else's story. Well, this goes back to Umbridge a little and to the personal experience that made me hate her.
Yeah.
As a kid, I would play pretend with my friends, and I was always the sidekick.
Okay.
I would be the lady in waiting to the fairy queen.
Yeah.
Or while my friend battled the enemy, I would be protecting the young and the old and all that.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, that was okay.
Yeah.
But then I got older and bigger, and I didn't want to be the sidekick anymore. I wanted to be the hero of my own story. The thing that I got annoyed with just this weekend was I was taking these Facebook quizzes for no particularly good reason.
Okay.
And they answer these quizzes based on what you post on Facebook.
Okay.
So because I post a lot about social justice, I think Facebook's got it into its head that I'm some kind of saint, which I'm certainly not.
Okay.
And they comment on my being cute and sweet, which I have fought for a long time to not be, because again, that's what a sidekick is. They support the hero. They don't have much discernible personality of their own.
You're clearly being a hero and organized around a real struggle and with a good sense of who the villain is.
Yeah, and I think in all real struggles, it's not one person who's the villain, it's changing the way whole groups of people think.
Yeah. Which is something that literature can do, books can do,
yes,
right?
I've wanted to be a writer since I was 8, and I think I've been telling stories since I could talk.
Yeah.
So I do that because it's what I do, but I do tell the stories that I want to read. I mentioned the Mother-Daughter Book Club books earlier.
Right.
Great series, but something that's hard for me in this and many other middle school books is it's clearly not too young to suggest that someone could be a gender or sexual minority because the straight girls are having and boys are having their crushes up the wazoo. But it's always so very literally straight and narrow.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to break out of that.
Yeah.
I have a project which I only have very roughly. I don't have the whole story in my head yet, but I want to write a middle school lesbian novel.
Okay, awesome. Hopefully you can reach many readers, and hopefully we can realize maybe if we're all the villain, then none of us are, or maybe maybe it will help us rather than be so punishing. Perhaps just decide, I guess we all have something to contribute to solving some of these real problems out there. Rather than chasing after these pretend problems, made up problems.
That being said, I don't want to underestimate the effect of personal drama on anyone, because I've been in high school. I know that stuff is scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's something else I was talking about to someone recently, that high school is like, I just learned this word, a microcosm for the real things that go on in the world.
Absolutely. The personal's political.
Yeah.
Yeah, how are we going to fix this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating interview.
Yes.
Amir. Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing so readily a wide variety of experiences and interests and for sharing your projects. You know, some are completed and some are yet to come. And I know I'm walking away with all kinds of new resources to get me even more excited about reading and theater and words and real life. Yeah, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and it got me thinking about some of the thoughts that I didn't quite know were in my head too.
Yeah, good. Well, job well done then.
Live by the sword, you die by the same. When you're casting Avada Kedavra around, it's like a cursed boomerang. When you live by the sword, you die by the same. When you're casting Avada Kedavra around, it's like a cursed boomerang. Come on. Take a listen now. Sometimes the scars that burn are gonna be the ones that make you turn your life around. I'm waiting for you when my wand isn't raised. I left the stone and the dust and the haze. I'm ready to die and lay in the grave like Diggory did my beloved house slave. If that's what you want, then continue to kill. But you could have a life, just surrender the thrill. Come on! Woo! Come on, put your wand down, or it'll come back to you, yeah. I said, put your wand down now. Comes back to you. When you live by the sword, you die by the same. When you're casting Avada Kedavra around, it's like a cursed boomerang. When you cut your soul, you sent away exactly what you need today to have a life. See, you've no heart, we're miles apart. Morphin' I'm not, I have a voice to say. Never revealed in a heart's concealed. The truth of us all like a fruit unpeeled, whole come what may. Destroy if you must what you think is me, but love will remain something you'll never see. Come on! Woo! One more chance now, or it'll come back to you, yeah. I said, put your wand down. It comes back to you.
Well, that's a wrap for episode 14. If you'd like to say hi before episode 15, come on down to Emerson Suite at Ithaca College on March 25th, where the Comic Book Club of Ithaca will be hosting the 42nd Ithacon. Potter Watch will be part of a Harry Potter panel and have a booth set up at the con, where we can talk Harry Potter, answer Harry Potter trivia questions, and do live interviews. If you can't get down to Ithaca and would like to be a special guest instead, send us an email at potterwatchmail@gmail.com. Potter Watch is a podcast made by fans for fans and produced in Ithaca, New York by Tony Catraccia.